Hello, everyone. Good evening to you all, and thank you so very much for joining us today. I'm Alex from Macmillan Education, and I'm joined here by one of our co-authors for the new Success at CSEC Social Studies book from St. Vincent, Ms. Timeisha Jacobs, and today she will be walking us through the topic of unlocking civic awareness, teaching the topic of government with purpose using practical approaches. Timeisha is online and she is ready to interact with you. Timeisha, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Alex. Thank you very much.
Anyone else, if you can hear me, can you give me a thumbs up or a hey? There we go. Thumbs up. I love that. The chat box is available for anyone who is interested in communicating directly with Timeisha or myself for the duration of the call and of the webinar, rather. And we will be happy to answer any questions that you might have. At this point, I am going to transfer to Timeisha. Timeisha, this is your floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Alex said, I am Timeisha Jacobs and I am from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am one of the co-authors of the new text, Success at CSEC Social Studies. And on behalf of the Macmillan Education team, it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar under the theme, Unlocking Civic Awareness, teaching the topic of government with purpose using practical approaches. I am thrilled to have such passionate group of educators, advocates, and civic-minded individuals joining us today as we explore how to bring the subject of government to life in the classroom and beyond. And especially now in a time when civic understanding is vital than ever. And our collective goal for today is to discover meaningful, practical strategies that not only inform us, but would inspire us. I do intend to cover quite a bit today. So thank you for being here and for your commitment to fostering civic awareness in your classrooms. So with that being said, let's get started. So I am going to do an icebreaker at this point. Never mind, we are in the virtual environment. We can still break the ice. And this will be the beginning of what will be a rather engaging and interactive session. So you can quickly scan the QR code, then share your response. For those of you who are joining using your cellular phones, Alex would just quickly post the link in the chat so you have access to this first icebreaker activity. All right, so I'm seeing persons saying it's saying no link at this time. So let me just get that going. I think that's from my end. Okay. Do you have access? Let me know quickly in the chat. Okay, so I see persons basically typing, so that's a good sign. Okay, so I am quickly going to share my screen so that everybody can see some of the things that I am seeing on my screen. So let me just. All right. So I am seeing quite a bit. Okay, so I'm familiar with that one. Hags bathe in the first water. Take opportunities when they first arise. Okay, yeah. Foul huna hair, sugar hair book. Yeah, I'm familiar with that one. Okay, so this one is a first timer. Tanto. That's the first time. Time will tell. Interesting. Very interesting. Who don't hear us feel, yes. Okay, so I see a few more persons. Moon does run till they catch them. Yes, I'm familiar with that one. Okay, let me see if. Okay, this is my first time hearing this one. Fowl with feed a yard. Na hard fi catch. Okay, that's my first time hearing that one. Okay, so that's basically brings us to our Caribbean roots, right? And I think that's the beauty of teaching social studies in the Caribbean. You would tend to bring up a lot of these in your classrooms, and we would hear the students share many of these with us. And it is what makes our classroom exciting and engaging. You never miss the well. Yes, I'm familiar with that one. You never miss the well till the water run dry. Indeed. Okay, so it was lovely of you to share. So we are going to get back to our session. And of course, if you did not get a chance to share it on the platform, it's okay for you to share it in the chat. All right. So let me just quickly switch back to my screen. And let's get started. So there we had the icebreaker. Okay, let me see. This is giving me a little bit of problems. So hold on a few.
While Tamisha is readjusting on her end, I'll take this time to gently remind everyone that everyone that's in attendance today will receive a certificate of attendance automatically. This will be sent to your email shortly after the webinar has ended. And it's also important to note that the webinar is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the Macmillan Caribbean YouTube channel in due course, which can then be shared with your colleagues that couldn't have made today's session. And there will also be a short survey along with the certificate at the end of the webinar. So I will kindly ask everyone to complete the survey when they receive it. Thank you. Back to you.
So I am seeing my screen. I'm not sure if you, Alex, are you seeing my screen?
I'm just seeing you.
You are?
I'm seeing you.
Oh, you're seeing me. Hold on, let me see what's going on. For some reason, it's not popping up. I guess this is what technology does to us sometimes.
I like that one. Cockroach don't play in fall party.
All right, let me try again. One more attempt. You're seeing my screen now? Yes.
No, it says that you have started. Yes, I can see it now.
Okay, great. So the icebreaker, we just had that one. So we're going to move right into what we have planned for today. So things to be covered during the session. So what we want to look at 4 things this afternoon. 1, challenges teachers encounter while teaching the topic government. 2, breaking down the broad topic of government into simpler topics. 3, pedagogical approach to covering the topic government. And 4, assessment strategies to be used when covering the topic. Good. Now, it is at this time that I would basically have that conversation, just a little reminder, reflection on the nature of social studies. I know that quite a number of teachers for countries across the Caribbean, for some persons, it's mandatory. Some persons have an option, right? So it means it clashes with other areas and the students get to choose what subject they wish to do. And sometimes as teachers, we end up covering it, not because it's our specialized area, but basically it's an area that we have to cover in order to meet our school's workload. So just a refresher, social studies, as we know, is an interdisciplinary subject that basically helps learners to understand how society works, both past and present, and it draws from history, geography, civics, economics, and sociology. And it basically equips students with the knowledge and the skills, even the values and attitudes that they need to basically actively participate in the communities across the region and the wider world. And when you look at the core of social studies, there are basically 5 basic principles. And for those of us who are not familiar with them, I am just going to touch base on them, because the truth is, once you are teaching social studies, the overarching goal is basically to ensure that your students are have civic competence. And this is what we want our students to have, so that they have the ability to make informed decisions, all in the name of public good as citizens, and the very fact that we are living in a culturally diverse democratic society, right? So the first one we're going to look at is the principle of social studies being active. And when we say social studies is active, we're basically saying that when the students are learning social studies, whenever you are teaching social studies, it should involve students doing, not just listening or reading, right? This means that the students will be engaged in activities such as discussions, debates, role play, and simulations, field work, interviews, and projects, right? And it matters when we try to ensure that we cover this principle in our classroom, because active learning, those of us who would have done further studies in teaching the area, you would know that active learning helps students to develop critical thinking skills, collaboration, and communication. And this is what we want our students to take away when they do leave our classrooms. The second principle, meaningful. Whenever we are covering social studies, we want to ensure that the content that we are covering should connect with the students' lives, their interests, and real world experiences. So as teachers, we want to make links between classroom topics and current events or even personal experiences. Because when students, and studies would have shown this, when students see the relevance of what they're learning, they are more motivated to retain information longer. And that is something that we want, because very often it can become a struggle in the classroom where we cover a topic and to ourselves, we taught it so well and we did such a beautiful job, and only to give an X and realize, hey, the students did not remember much. You don't have much to mark. So we want to make it meaningful as possible, so that the students can see the relevance. The third principle, it should be value-based. And when we talk about value-based here, our teaching should help students to explore values, so that they can develop ethical reasoning and be able to reflect on moral dilemmas. And it emphasizes a lot of those key core principles such as respect, fairness, empathy, and a commitment to the common good, we would say. And this is what we want. Value-based, basically, once you would have had that aspect in your classroom, it basically fosters the students to be responsible citizens, and here is where they tend to develop a strong sense of civic responsibility once you are doing it and you're doing it well. Another principle, integrative. So social studies is definitely integrative. As I said before, it's an area where you cover several content in different subject discipline, right? So it integrates content, skills, and experiences from areas such as art, science, language, maths, geography, sociology. And an integrative approach helps students to see the big picture and basically understand the interconnectedness between some of the societal issues that we're having. And we want the students to be able to take away that we are not living in a bubble. Things are outside there and they're going to experience it, and they have to be able to be really flexible, and they are able to link what they're learning in geography to what they're learning in maths and social studies and science. The final principle, challenging. So very often I hear students say it often. I don't know if that's the case in your classroom, but they would say social studies easy and it's common sense. And then when you do get a report from CXC, it's not saying the same thing, right? Or sometimes even when you mark your scripts in the classroom, you realize that, hey, you told me that this was common sense, but it's not common sense after all, right? It requires you to do a little bit more. So social studies should push students to think deeply. And when I say think deeply here, I'm talking about complex issues, justice, power, identity, responsibility. And it should involve students analyzing multiple perspectives. And that is because the nature of this subject is, we would say, subjective. So there isn't really any completely wrong idea. You have to be able to justify. Once you are justified, then you're on the safe side. And we want them to be able to see things from multiple perspectives, and we want them to be able to form evidence-based conclusions. So you're not just going along with something because somebody said that, or you're not just going along with it because of your mood, but once you're able to see that perspective, this is how I see it, and I see it this way because I would have gathered evidence from here or there or this book or this article, right? And why it matters? Because whenever you have a challenging curriculum, whenever you don't give students the idea that it's it's superficial, or this is just a breeze over, you are going to allow them to build reasoning. They're going to build inquiry skills, problem solving skills, and they need all of these skills to ensure that democratic participation is involved, right? And the topic of government is one of those topics that we can say is challenging, right? I know many students they struggle with this topic, and not only from exam, but even in your classroom discussion, you realize that some of these students they're not really exposed to some of the things that you're talking about. So it is our duty as teachers to ensure that we bring it home, that we find that level of comfort, and allow the students to really see that this is something that you're going to experience wherever you decide to go in the world. And we want you to grasp this topic and grasp it well. And reports, CXC reports that were published, I am not sure if many teachers do read it, but it's evident that this is one of the areas that they struggle with. It's a concern, yes. So we want to try as much as possible that we have the tools, that we have the resources, that we try to get that comfort so that the students are confident when they do go into the exam room to write the exam. Okay, so that's just a review of the nature of social studies and the principles. Okay, so we're going to move on, and we want to now look at, okay, my screen just decided to stick. All right. Technology is not on my side today. All right, so I'm going to quickly stop share and then reshare again because for some reason it's sticking. All right. Okay, please do tell me you're seeing my screen. Alex, you're seeing my screen?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, I think I see somebody raising their hands. You can go ahead and mute your mic if it's a question you wish to ask. It's okay if it's a question that you wish to ask, then you can go ahead. I see several hands raised.
For everyone, if you don't wish to use the voice, you can also just use the chat.
All right. My screen is still being seen, right?
Yes, please.
I don't know why it's not moving on to the next slide. So I'm going to try again. All right. Okay. So we do have another, I'm hoping everybody's seeing my screen now. We do have another activity. So again, you can scan the QR code and you can basically leave your comments or your points inside of the platform. Alex, if you can kindly copy and paste that link for me in the chat so that those persons who are accessing via cellular phones can just quickly click on it and complete. Okay, so Alex, I think what I might have to do, I would allow you to share my screen. And then you maneuver from there because I'm having some technical difficulties here. I don't think I would actually get to move on if I decide that I'm going to stick with this challenge I'm having. All right, so okay, so it just decided to magically work. So this is where we should be. Okay. I want persons to be able to see what is being said in the
Hi, Dana. I see your hands up. Do you have a question?
okay, so I'm going to quickly share my screen so that persons can see what some of the challenges persons are having. Okay. All right, so okay, so I'm seeing students often have a problem doing questions on electoral systems. Okay. Sustain interest. Yeah, that seems to be a problem. I do have that challenge as well. Students lack knowledge of the subject area. Yes, some of them don't have any prior experience at all. That is indeed true. Right. Any more issues? You can share what you experience from a teacher as well. Lack of resources, right? Lack of resources, that's a big thing. Okay, I'm seeing when doing the structure and composition of the government, it feels too theoretical and boring to them. The types of government system example, the first part suppose versus the proportional representation. Students mix up the government branches. Students are not clearly not tuning with current. That's a huge problem. A huge problem. And so it can be very difficult for them to relate. Lack of support. Okay. Students do not like to do research ahead of lessons to have discussion in class. All right. too many concepts, cannot relate, boring, wordy text, lack of interest. I see. All right. That is true. Very much so. All right. So I am going to go back to sharing my screen. All right. Alex, you want to go ahead and share for me? For some reason, I think my PowerPoint just is at once. Okay.
I presume we're on this slide, right?
Right. Yes, that's a slide that we were on. I'm trying to get let me see. All right. If you can go to navigating the challenge back to that screen. Okay. Stop sharing a while and let me see if because my Zoom over here, it's not allowing me to do anything. So I'm actually not seeing anything on the screen. So give me a few, please. All right. You're seeing my screen, Alex?
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, so I think it's back up and running. All right. Are there any more challenges persons are sharing in the chat though, apart from what was mentioned? No? Okay. All right. So we do have a text available. Macmillan Education do have a text available. This text became available in January of 2025. I am not sure if there are persons who have a sample of the text. I know there is a e-sample, and there are also physical samples. I know across the region, some agents would have distributed so that teachers would have a physical copy of the text to actually, preview, review, and even use in the classroom, and so that students have something that can actually cover the syllabus that was amended. So here is a picture. If you haven't seen it, this is how the front of the picture, front of the text, sorry, looks. If you do not have a copy and you wish to have a sample, you can contact one of your local agents. You have copies in Barbados, right, Alex? You do?
Yes, I do.
Right. They were distributed, or persons would have to contact to get a copy.
Well, some of them are with the Ministry of Education in the Resource Center. And for those that would like physical copies directly, they can find them at Brighton's. Or if they wish to get it directly from me, then they can just email me or give me a call.
Okay. All right. So a sampler is available if you wish to use. And basically what I intend to do is for those persons who have the physical copy, you would be able to look through it if you do have it at home. If not, that's okay. You would be able to go back and see exactly what I am talking about. So we're moving on. Now, you do not need to worry about if you are covering content once you are using this text. The reason for that is because those persons would have previewed the text, you would immediately see that the objectives are listed at the start of each unit. So the objectives taken directly from the syllabus, they can be found at the very beginning of the topic that you are covering, the unit you're covering. So if you're going to wonder, am I covering this aspect? You will be able to identify if you have. So you don't need to worry about that. And like I said, if you do not have a copy, you can access the book for 1 month via the Macmillan Caribbean Facebook page, or you can contact your local agent for a sample copy. But this is basically how it is laid out. So it makes life pretty easy for teachers and students. Not because I'm the co-author, but yes, basically. So you can, again, scan the QR code and complete the poll. All right. Alex, I don't know if you probably want to make available the link again so that person can have access to that bit. Okay. I think I forgot to mention 5 being that you're most confident. I think I actually forgot to include it there. Let me see if I can add it. I think persons are able to see as well how confident persons are. So I'm thinking majority of teachers seem to be pretty confident when covering the topic. All right, so you can continue to share, but something that we can zero in on here when we do reflect on the challenges that we are having teaching government in the classroom. One of the issues that was raised on the platform was limited content knowledge. And that is true. Not only the students, but I know there are cases where some teachers are not comfortable covering the topic of government. And this is actually one of the reasons why sometimes the students don't grasp it as well. Trying to get the content in so that the students can prepare well for their exam, and you yourself, you are having problems actually teaching the content, that can make things even more challenging. So limited content knowledge, that seems to be a challenge. Also, I know from my experience that sometimes you have what you call political sensitivity. Sometimes, you become fearful of making certain comments, or there are cases where students are fearful of making certain comments because they're afraid of how their classmates may see them. And I know when it comes to this area, some teachers may fear controversy or accusation of biasness when discussing political issues or leaders or parties. But the truth is, we really have to try our best to level the playing field. Even though it's an area that you're not comfortable, you still have to do justice, right? Because at the end of the day, you want your students to be able to take away from the classroom, not only to write the exam, but you want them to be good citizens. You want them to be able to participate in the democratic process. And so you shouldn't really shy away from discussing the issues. And when we get into the pedagogical approaches, that is something that would come up. Insufficient resources as well. We know that we are living in harsh economic times, and so resources can be very limited, and this makes it very hard to deliver the current curriculum and relevant lessons on government. That's a fact. Then we do have to battle with student disinterest. So students may view government topics as boring or irrelevant or leading to classroom disengagement. That is something that happens. And then we have curriculum constraints as well, where the limited time that we have to cover such broad topic, it can prevent teachers from actually exploring the topic of government as you really should. And this is something that can be very challenging. And I know how it is when you feel as if you didn't do justice. And so that can also create panic among students. They may tell themselves, okay, well, Miss didn't get to cover that area, and so I'm not really confident, because time is really limited and you still have to push through. So as much as you want to go in depth, that may not be the case. And then we have lack of administrative support. This was mentioned by someone. Sometimes school leadership may, discourage or deep, trying to avoid political conflict and so on. So you don't really get the necessary support, especially where you wish to bring in somebody who might be from a party that is not popular amongst the people. You might meet some challenge there. And then you also have personal discomfort. I know of cases where teachers' own political views or experiences may cause them to just avoid the topic altogether. And if for some reason, I would say to you, you are facing all of these challenges, you're really between a rock and a hard place. And then it basically affects how you deliver the topic in the classroom, because you just don't know where to start or how to cover the scope and sequence of the topic. But I would say to you that this new text, it gives a helping hand. It's student friendly, it's teacher friendly, so you don't have to really worry so much about if the content is there or are there enough activities for me to get the topic through. There are some very engaging and very interesting activities that your students can complete to make life a little bit easier. So with that being said, we want to move on to simplifying the broad topics. So right here you're seeing on the screen here, this is basically how I try to map out things. It may work for me. Well, it works for me. It may not work for you, but I think it's a good idea. It's a start. This is something that basically I try to trash out whatever I have in my head on paper, so that when it's time to teach the topic, it doesn't become so difficult. This platform, I usually use it. It's a very good platform if you want to do mind maps, or if you want to do brainstorm certain things. CMAP, that's the platform I would have used to create this picture for today. Now, I know that as teachers, we are expected to plan, and planning is a critical aspect of delivering the topic of government. Doing justice to it. You have to plan. And personally, for me, when I do get to that topic of government, I do things a little bit different. I do not follow the syllabus in the same order that they have things laid out, because what I would have realized is, this year would be 15 years in the classroom, but in my earlier years, students, it was a challenge. Most of the issues you are raising here, it's something that I would have battled with too. And it took me quite a while to really familiarize myself with how to teach government. And I think at this point, I can say I would have mastered how I want to go about covering the topic. So what I do first, I flesh out all the things that I need to cover. Now, this is just a snapshot. It's not the entire thing. So I flesh out how I want to cover things. So I begin with what I would do first. Now I know the way the syllabus is outlined, you usually begin with forms of government, and then you move to systems of government, and then you move to branches of government. And over the years, I've realized that even when you give a little quiz and you ask students to identify or list or state 2 systems of government, you would find they put in the forms. Or sometimes you ask them for 2 forms of government and you would find they would give you the systems or the branches, and you realize it's all confusing. So my approach, I usually begin with the forms of government first. So I said to the students, you're going to basically learn how governments are formed, yes, but we're going to look at that aspect first, forms of government. And once I am finished with forms of government, I then move on to systems of government, right? Once I am finished with systems of government, I jump the gun, because I said to myself, it would be easier for me to go through how political parties prepare for general elections, something that is really familiar to them. And that is what you want to do to hit home. You want to ensure that they're, in their comfort zone. And I know that this is something that many of them are familiar with. They are familiar with the process of how citizens go about preparing for general elections. And so then I jump the gun, I go to prepare how political parties prepare. And once I am finished with that, they know all about the preparation. I then move on to the electoral systems. So you already prepare for general elections. You now move on to how do you vote, right? So then I move on to the electoral systems. Once I am finished with the electoral systems, I basically go to the branches of government, because after covering how you go about voting, I move on to the structure, branches and their role, how the government that you just voted into power is organized. So it flows a little bit better, and I have seen results. So sometimes you don't really have to go with the same order the syllabus has it. You can change things up a bit just to get the students comfortable, right? So you want to flesh out scope and sequence, because they are essential when breaking down the topic of government, because you want to ensure that the teaching is structured, it is coherent, and it is effective, right? And we know scope defines what will be taught, the content. And of course, I would outline all the concepts that I have to cover under each element. And then the sequence, you determine the order in which it is taught, right? So you have to be that comfortable, because if you are comfortable, then the students would be comfortable, right? So you do not have to teach the same way it is outlined in the syllabus. Once you cover everything, however you want to arrange it, because at the end of the day, you want to ensure that there is a logical progression of learning. So when the students, with the way I do it, once the students would have covered the forms of government, right? They would have learned who governs and how they govern, who holds power. They would be confident enough to move on to the system, how power is shared, how power is divided. Once they're comfortable with that, we can then move on to preparing for elections. How do you do that? How do citizens do that? What are some of the things involved? Once they're comfortable with that, they then move on to how you go about voting, the electoral processes. So the first party post, the proportional representation. And then once they are through with that, you let them know that these are the branches, the people you just voted, this is how they are organized. So I'm hoping that it makes sense. Any questions, you're free to post it in the chat. And something that you would see coming out is that once you arrange, you sequence everything in a logical order, you are basically preventing gaps and overlaps in learning. Once you have a clear sequence and a clear scope, it ensures that all the critical aspects of government are covered. And that is exactly what you want, right? And then too, you would realize that once you cover it in that way, it builds on prior knowledge. So the students would be able to tell you about the forms and the systems and how you prepare for elections, because as they go about learning about one thing, they're able to build up that knowledge so that when they get to things that are increased in depth or more complex, they're able to handle the topic. And it improves students' understanding once you chunk things, but ensure that it is done in a logical order, in an order that makes sense. And then once you do that, you would also see an enhancement in students' engagement. They would be a little bit more focused. They wouldn't feel so overwhelmed about learning all of these things about government. And then once they're confident enough, you're going to have the mastery of the content. They're going to show you that I really do understand. So when you do ask for two forms of government, you're going to get autocracy and democracy. You're not going to get constitutional monarchy and republic, because the students would have recognized that this is the easier. I would have learned it this way, and it seems to be easier to follow, right? So the platform, like I said, the platform that I use to create this is CMAP. It's free, so you can quickly Google it, download it, and use it if you wish to do so. All right. So we're now going to look at the pedagogical approach to teaching government. So basically, the 5 approaches: you have the constructivist approach, you have the collaborative approach, you have the integrative approach, you have the reflective approach, you have the inquiry-based approach, right? So I'm going to go into each approach individually, and then in front of you on your screens, you would see some of the activities. These activities basically comes from the book. So with the constructivist approach, this is a student-centered teaching philosophy that we are aware of, and it is based on the idea that learners actively construct knowledge by building on what they already know rather than just receiving information passively, right? And in the context of government, this approach emphasizes hands-on experiences, reflections, real-world application, and collaborative learning. And these are some examples from the text of how you can adopt the constructivist approach in your teaching. These are activities that your students can engage in. So you can, as a teacher, you can organize and run a mock election in school, where you allow the students to set up a school council or a class council, and you allow them to do it in groups, and then they would decide on which electoral system you will use. They would appoint candidates. The entire process that they would have learned about, an activity is writing the text that allows them to basically follow through, refresh, right? Actually walk through the process that they would have just learned about. And then you also have analyzing a recent real life court case in your country. Doesn't have to be in the country, could also be in the region. And you allow them to research this real life court case, write notes on the background, the legal arguments that came up, the court rulings, and so on and so forth. And this is an activity that you might tell yourself it's a lot of work, but if you ask them to look at a recent case or something that is familiar with them, you would see how quickly they gather the information. My students last year, they they did the Vibes Cartel case, and and they came back with a lot of information. Even some of the things that they were telling me about the case, I did not know about the case. And that is because they would have read and it was so interesting to them. It's something that they enjoy doing. So you really want to bring the classroom to life like this, in this way, and have them really construct knowledge, building on what they already know. Allow them to draw conclusions on their own, present a balanced argument with your guidance, of course. And there is also another activity in the book where you can hold a mock session of parliament or a mock court trial. And then, of course, you are allowed to do field trips as social studies teachers, and you might want to consider taking them to the to parliament for them to experience the parliament session, and allow them to walk along with guided questions that they would answer having to visit the session in parliament. So these are all experiences that we want our students to have, and this is something we should try as teachers to go, you know, go that distance to ensure that they're able to learn the content, you know, in a way that they would remember it. Then we have the collaborative approach. And this approach basically emphasizes, in terms of teaching government, it emphasizes student teamwork, shared responsibility, and group interaction. And all of this is done to deepen learning. And it's rooted in the idea that learning is a social process. Students learn best when they are actively engaged with their peers, when they're able to exchange their ideas, when they're able to solve problems together. And this is what we want our students to do. And so the book was designed with this in mind. And so there are several activities that covers that collaborative approach. So you have in a small groups, role play scenarios that display good citizenship. And these are activities, if you have a double session, you can definitely do these. Even if you don't want to do it in class, there are some activities that the students can do at home and bring them to class. You have in-class debates where half of the class argues for reducing the powers of the prime minister, the president, and the other half argues against reducing the powers of the prime minister and president. And these are activities that students tend to enjoy because they're able to express themselves, right? You allow them to do different things collaboratively. So you allow them to create the posters, the visual displays, and these are things that they're familiar with because they're on the TikTok platform, the Instagram, the Facebook, and so on and so forth. So these are things that the students are familiar with. So you just put it together and allow them to basically express themselves through these formats. The integrative approach. Now, this approach involves blending the topic of government with other subjects or real-life themes, right? To create that holistic, meaningful learning experience. So rather than teaching government as an isolated topic, it is connected with areas like history. So when you are covering that systems of government where you have to cover constitutional monarchy and republic, you want to take them through what it was like historically having certain systems in place, from the old representative system come right down. You have the economics part of it, an activity in the book that highlights that. You have, imagine you are responsible for allocating government spending next year. Trade and tax have raised 400 US million in revenue, which you must spend on the following service. Decide how you would go about spending that money. So from an economical standpoint, how would you do this? in terms of language arts, you ask them to write a letter to the Commission of Police. So you're integrating the different subject areas, and these are things that eventually they would have to do in the world of work, right? All in the name of having them see the relationships that exist between the things that they do in the classroom and everyday life. And we want them to be able to develop multiple perspectives and apply knowledge in real world context. And what better way to do so than to try some of these activities. Moving on, we have the reflective approach. Now, this is something that can be a challenge for students, but I think if you plan it out, if you plan it well, or you do it in pieces, it can be executed. So when it comes to the reflective approach to teaching government, it focuses on helping students to think deeply about what they are learning, how it relates to their lives, and how it shapes their values, beliefs, and civic identity, right? It emphasizes that personal meaning making, that critical self-awareness, that moral and ethical reasoning aspect. So even when they do go to Parliament, when you do take that visit as a field trip, they're able to write about what they experience and who said what and why they think that particular person should not have said that and how they feel about that person saying that particular thing, right? So this is what you really want. And then you have them doing questioning and having that self-inquiry process where they ask, what do I think about this? Why do I think that? And this is something that you would ask when they reflect on their experience, right? And you want them to be able to link what they would have learned through all of these experiences to real life. Who knows, one day, some of these very students that we teach, you know, they would be in Parliament debating these same issues that we were having fun with in the class, right? And that is what you want. And there are several ways you can do it. You can have them complete exit slips about how they feel. You can have them do a little journal writing. You can have them creating dialogues or even cartoon strips to allow them to reflect on what they would have learned, creating that safe space. And you want to try to do different activities as well when it comes to the reflection process, because you know that you're going to have these students who like to draw, and nothing is wrong with that. And you would have these students who would like to create a calypso, and you would have these students who would write a poem for you. So you allow them to reflect using several activities. And then you have the inquiry-based approach. Now, this approach is a student-centered method that encourages learners to explore questions, investigate topics, and they do so through active discovery. And in the context of teaching government, this approach helps students to develop more meaningful understanding of political systems, civic responsibility, and how governments function, right? And the benefit of all of this, whenever they do the inquiry-based approach, you would see that they tend to engage more. They have a better understanding of what they're learning. And it actually builds their research skills and their civic skills, which is what you want, because at the end of the day, the students, they are the ones who would have to submit an SBA. And once you would have done several activities that required them to do the research, you are not going to have any challenge when you are doing the SBA, right? Because the students would have been engaged in activities where they would have researched. Take a look at this activity in the text. In groups, research arguments for and against change for a constitutional monarchy to a republic system of government. So here the students actually have to go and look for the information, right? And this will be best done if you guide the students. You know, you warn them about plagiarism, copying things that they didn't write. You warn them about it. You guide them along the way so that even when they do submit assignments or when they do come with a debate, they're able to actually quote who said what or what year they said it, right? Because that's what we want to be able to want them to be able to master, right? So the inquiry-based approach, there are several activities in the text that allows for this, quite a number of case studies, quite a number of them. And at the end of the day, once you would have tried some of these activities, you would realize that the students become independent thinkers. They're able to express themselves and tell you, hey, this is exactly how I feel about this issue. And there are studies out there that would have shown that the way how I feel about this issue is quite normal, right? Now, I want you to share what have you tried and it worked. So you can do so in the chat. What have you tried and it worked? So feel free to open your mics as well and share what worked and why. Yes, I see somebody saying debating on the move to CCJ. Yes, these are all activities that you can try in the classroom. And trust me, the students enjoy it. Huh? So I'm seeing several persons would have tried debates. They would have done mock election. They had surveys. Okay, yes, because at the end of the day, the students have to complete some aspect for their SBA anyway. So having them exposed to such activities is only going to make the SBA a perfect score SBA. Case studies, mock presentations. Did anybody visit Parliament? I intend to do so sometime in the future. I've not done that field trip with my students as yet. Hoping to do so. Not to view a sitting though. Okay, just a visit. All right. Now, if you're struggling to find resources, resources are available. I know if you go to the Me platform, Macmillan's Me platform, you would get some resources to use in your classroom. Okay, so with the recent elections in Trinidad, I asked if they saw the steps in the election process. Very good, yes. And quite a number of Caribbean countries have elections this year. So it's a perfect opportunity for them to observe the process, see what it is like and share their experience and do the evaluation, because some of them would tell you, oh, you know, I did this, I saw this and I don't think that was right, or this particular politician did this and you don't think that they should have done that, and you ask them why, and you allow them to share, and then you would see that value-based aspect that I spoke about coming out, because right there you're able to assess what are some of the principles and core values that they have. Okay, it takes somebody saying it takes a lot of teacher preparation and pocket money. Well, that's true. And that is why I said you need administrative support, because if you're going to do these activities, you're definitely going to need funding, right? Because you have to do the printing and the labeling of the artifacts. And I know of cases in some countries you can actually reach out to the electoral office, and they too would lend some assistance there. I know for St. Vincent for sure, if you wish to have somebody to give the students a little bit, you know, converse with them about elections and so on, it's always good to reach out to your local election body. All right. Okay. So thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing. All right. So that brings us down to the assessment aspect. Now, the way how the text is designed, you would see that at the end of each unit, you have some assessment activities, right? At the end of each unit, you have assessment activities. So the multiple choice questions, you have the short answer questions, you have the essay type questions, right? So in terms of paper pen tests, you can find some of them in the text. And some, well, it's laid out in such a way that it mimics what the CSEC exam would look like. And those of you who would have had a copy of this year's paper, you would see the 14 marks question now being implemented and the 22 marks for the essay, right? So it's laid out in that way, so you wouldn't have a problem. These are sample questions that you can actually use. You don't even have to wait until the end of the unit to actually preview the students to the questions. As you cover a topic and you realize a subtopic and you realize that, hey, there is an assessment question that I can use after this particular subtopic, sorry, you can go right ahead and expose the students to it. So the way how the questions are designed, you have the knowledge and comprehension aspect, and in the text you would see KC. So you know that's a knowledge and comprehension question. And then you would see the UK. And the UK here stands for use of knowledge. So the question would tell you exactly which higher order or lower order thinking skills the students are required, right? Good. Now, we want to empower our students, and in doing so, we want to assess their understanding and we want to engage them with government using several assessment strategies. Now, we are not living in a one size fit all, right? We want to ensure that we are catering for the different learning styles, because we know that there is that one child in the class who would stand up and express themselves so well. But then when it comes to writing, it's a struggle. We do not want to put them at a disadvantage, right? We want to be able to create an assessment that would meet them, right? And so what I basically did here, I look at the different types of assessment. So you have the formative, the performance, the project-based, the written, the oral, the pair or self. Nothing is wrong with doing a pair or self-assessment in the form of a reflection sheet where you ask the students, what did I learn? You might ask, how would I benefit? And these are things that you can actually grade because you can see the progress in the students' learning. If they're able to tell you that I learned about the first past the post system, and then you ask them, do you think this is a good system? And they say to you, yes. And then you ask them, why do you think that's a good system? You are covering so many levels of thinking there, so many lower order and higher level thinking skills right there you are covering. So in terms of activity, for the formative, you can do exit tickets reflection, and the skills assessor, you would basically check for understanding and reflection. if you do the performance base, where you ask the students to create a campaign video for a political party that they have. Sounds fun, right? And then here you might want to assess their communication skills or how well they would have done with engaging the citizens in their communities with this video. You might want to do the project based, where they create a model government, right? And here you would assess collaborative skills, because of course you might want to put them in groups to get this done. You might want to also assess their application skills. And then you have the written form. So it doesn't always have to be a quiz. You can allow them to write a letter. You can allow them to basically write an article, because it's the same thing CSEC asks of them anyway when they're doing their final assessment. That essay question, usually they ask you to write a letter or write an article. Same thing. So you expose them here, and then you assess their writing and critical thinking skills, because now CSEC is actually giving mark towards your essay format, grammar and so on and so forth. And then you have the pair or self. You give them a group task, you ask them to evaluate each other. And so you assess their metacognition or their evaluation skills. And then you have the traditional quiz or test, where you have the short quiz on government, branches of government, and then you assess basically if they're able to recall or comprehend. Right? So basically, these are some of the assessment strategies that you can try. And you can even have, in terms of the performance, you can even have them role playing. Even that mock activity, that mock election process, or that debate, you can actually design a rubric and grade the students and take your grade right there. Because like I said, that child who is struggling to write an essay might be able to get a full marks for this activity, right? You want to ensure that you meet all your students. So I'm going to allow you now to share in the chat what are some of the assessment activities that you would have done. Let's see some of the different activities that you have done apart from what is on the screen, and you comment on whether it would have worked for you or not. All right. So you would have had students create flyers, yes. Flyers and manifestos. Yes, I like that one. Launch a political party. You would be surprised as to some of the ideas that would come out when they do get to create their own. Do interviews with resource persons. That's a good one. Even political cartoon strip, and you would find that in your local newspapers, you would see these things. Allow them to do that. Allow them to explore that option as well. Allow them to create the cartoon strip. You tell them to add their sense of humor to it. And who knows, you never know, it would make it to the papers one day. Okay. Right? So like I said, you want to meet all your students. So it's not every day you would do a quiz. You try to do different things so that you can actually get the students to participate, and you would get them to engage. Because like I said, it's a topic for some students. Oh, this is so boring. But then when you're ready to do that debate, they are forced up to get that debate in. Right? So we want to meet all of our students. All right, so that brings us to Our final activity So I am going to ask you to scan the QR code and share your thoughts. So Alex, if you can just post this in the chat.
Share the link again, no problem.
Post the link in the chat. Let me ensure that I have all right. So you can scan the QR code. It's not there, so let me share back my screen so that you can get that bit done. So you should be able to get the QR code. All right. I think I saw somebody in the chat asking about if you can get a sample of the text in Trinidad. I think Mohan should have some sample copies. So you should have access.
Yes, Mohan did mention earlier in the communication chat box that he does have, and he would have given the information to contact their bookstore as well as the individuals within the bookstore that can help individuals to get access to the physical copies of the text. But I would have also shared in the chat for those who might have missed it. I would have shared the information for you to get access for 1 month to the digital text, which includes the code to download. But of course, you will have to register on the Me platform, and then you will be able to use the code, which is also there, and you will be able to access the text for 1 month.
Right. So I think Mohan is saying that you can call him. That's okay. Oh, somebody's asking to show the okay. Right. It should be active. Hold on, let me see. It should be active. Yes. All right. So I'm seeing persons saying they're enlightened, they're confident, they're empowered. I do hope so, because this is actually a topic that I enjoy teaching. Stranger, but it's a topic that I really like teaching. And then I think because of my enthusiasm and my, students are happy to to go forward with the topic, and that's something that we have to try as well. If your students are struggling with doing the covering the topic, you have to find some form of motivation, and who knows. So it's always important that you try an activity that you know that they will enjoy doing. A random debate to begin your class, you would be amazed at what that can do for that topic. Okay, so let me just go back. So here is the QR code to scan and share. Right, I'm happy to know that there are persons who found this session enlightening and engaging, and hopefully we could do another session if everybody is okay with that. If you wish to have that done, we can also organize another session to cover the information, how you would go about using the book to get through the topic. I know regional integration, regional development is also an area that a lot of students struggle with as well. So maybe we can have a session on that, who knows? But share your feedback. Like Alex said, there is he shared a link that you can go and leave your information in terms of what you thought about the session. So that brings.
I've just Tamisha, sorry, I've just reshared the information for everyone that's online right now, so that they can download and access the digital copy of the text. So it's like 3 chats up. If anyone wants to scroll back up and have a look at it, you can just download that PDF and save it to your phones or save it to your computers, and then that's yours to use whenever you decide, and you can share it with your colleagues as well.
All right, thank you very much. And of course, if you need a physical copy, they are available for sale in St. Vincent, not as yet. I think soon they will be available soon in St. Vincent for sale, so that your students can have access to them. All right. It was a pleasure to be here, and I want to say thank you for listening and engaging in today's webinar on the theme, Unlocking Civic Awareness, teaching the topic of government with purpose using practical approaches, presented by your co-author, Timeisha Jacobs. So I am happy to have been here, and I hope you did enjoy the session, and I'm hoping that we can do so at another time. All right. Feel free to reach out in the chat if you need to cover, you need to ask any question, you can message in the chat. You're welcome. You're welcome. And of course, like Alex said, you will get a certificate, but you have to provide the information. You have to provide the information in order to get that bit done, so that they can get that bit done. All right, have a wonderful evening. Thank you for, oh, we actually had persons from Talks and Kekase. Welcome.
Nice. Thank you, Tamisha, very, very much for taking the time out of your day today to come and sit with us. So everyone that would have registered for the session today, as long as you've registered, you will receive a certificate of participation at the end of the webinar today. And the session has been recorded, so you can share it with your colleagues as well, for future reference, and you can also go back to it if you need to. Included in the chat, like I said earlier, would have been the digital access to the soft copy of the text for, I think the code lasts, or the access lasts for 1 month. After that, then you should have by then physical sample copies for your perusal. So don't worry about that too much. Tamisha has done an exceptional job today. Thank you, Tamisha.
You're welcome.
And as we are having a by-election in Barbados, I felt like I could have asked some more questions, but you know, I didn't ask them. But thank you so very much, everyone, for coming online today, and I do hope you enjoy the rest of your evening.
Okay, Alex, I think someone is asking how soon can they get the certificate. I'm not sure.
Oh, the certificate should be available during the course of the evening. So as we end the call, it should be generated automatically based on who was on the call.
Right, okay. So there you have it. You can access your certificates as early as this evening.
Okay,
When
and
will
I
the
see some new
recording be
emails
available?
being dropped in there, so I
Asking.
presume that that the team at the office will look at these later on, and they will ensure that these individuals get theirs as well.
Okay, I think someone is asking when will the recording be available?
That is not up to me. The recording should be available within a couple of days, because it has to be rendered, well, saved and rendered, and then uploaded to YouTube. So I would say maybe give it a week.
All right. Okay, it was nice having you guys. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.